Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Showing Up to Your Life podcast and YouTube channel. Art Burns here, you there. Very happy to be here with you today. And I think, you know what? I think I might be more excited than I've ever been for one of these podcasts and YouTube channel episodes because of what I want to talk about today. Because what I want to talk about today is the most special thing that there ever has been in the history of the entire universe. What I want to talk about today is you. Okay, yes, you. Each one of us, right? You and every other person who's watching this and listening to my voice right now, each one of us is a unique and dynamic and very special, sort of a special combination of so many different, traits and strengths and weaknesses and beauties and all of these qualities that make each one of us. They make each one of us our own really unique being and a person. And so the thing about that is, though, that so many of us lose sight of who we really are. And it's not our fault, right? It's not your fault. It's not my fault. It's not anyone's fault that this has happened. And in a large way, really the most the most important aspect of all of the practices that I'm going over with you every day, and all the different contexts and concepts and philosophies and everything else that we talk about here, it's all geared towards developing the awareness so that we can see the real us inside of all of this. All right, now I'm going to elaborate on this, of course. We got plenty of time to talk about this today, but let's first talk about what it is that makes us lose sight of our, before we do that, let me tell you another story, a quick little story here. I was talking to somebody a couple of weeks ago, a friend of mine who's also in a coaching program that I attend, so we're both sort of clients of the coach who we work with. And they said, a few weeks ago, they brought up this really amazing concept of your ness, right? So my Art-Ness, right? The thing that makes me art, right? And this person was talking about it in terms of an acorn, right? Or a seed of any kind, right? An acorn doesn't lose its acornness to become an oak tree, right? The acorn stays an acorn the entire time, right? Until the tree rises from the acorn, right? The acorn doesn't turn into a tree. The acorn has all of the acorn, just as it is, just that little tiny thing holds, or any seed you want to talk about, holds all the information to make that huge tree that it will ever need. It never needs to become anything else to become that oak tree. Right? And the same thing is true for a seed that becomes a rose bush, or a seed that becomes a vegetable, right? The seed or the seed that becomes a person, right? If you take an ovary or an ovum, a single egg of a human, right? That little microscopic thing, that single cell, right, has all, I think it's a single cell, I'm not a scientist, but it has all of the information that is necessary to make this, right? But at no point did that ovum become something else before it became me, right? It allowed itself to be what it is, and this is what grew out of it. The same thing that happens to a seed or an acorn that grows into a mighty oak tree, right? At no point did that seed say, okay, I have to be something else. I have to become this tree. No. That's not how it works. The seed, the acorn remained an acorn the entire time until the acorn is no more, and now there is a tree, right? And so this is a very important concept, right? Because this is, the acorn has an acornness. And the thing is that if the acorn ever tried to be something else, well, then the tree would never happen, right? And so I want you to sit with that, and sit with this message a little bit, because this is really, really important, right? Our ness, right? And this is something that comes up with every single client that I get to work with. It comes up with myself. It comes up with all kinds of people I talk with in every area of life, right? That it always comes back to when we can operate from our authentic self, right? From our ness, right? When I can really be who Art Burns really is, that is when I am the best version of Art Burns that there could ever possibly be. And technically and really, in very, very real terms, when I am who I am, right? When I get in touch with my ness, with my Art-Ness, my Art Burns ness, right? That is when I am the most effective. That is when I am optimized to accomplish things. And in a very real sense, there's nothing I can't do when I operate from my authentic self, right? And so why is it that most of us don't operate from our authentic selves? I'm sure that's the question on everybody's mind, right? And of course it should be, because if this is the most, optimized and most powerful version of myself, well, then why the heck wouldn't I want to be that? Well, that's the question, right? And the answer is, well, I mean, we'll go into the why in a second, because I have a very strong reason for this, right? But before we go into the why, let's just consider that, the how, right? Because the how is perhaps more important, right? Because, the why. So let's talk about the why for a second. I guess chronologically, it makes more sense that way. So what is it that prevents us from being our authentic self? Well, it's very simple, actually, right? At some point in all of our lives, right, we try to do something from the core of our expression, right? From who we really are, the depths of who we are. Right, we motivate and we evoke and we try to be, we try to do something from that place of who we really are, authentic, our authentic self, right? And at some point, somebody didn't accept that thing. Right? I'll tell you my own personal story. So when I was growing up, right, and if any of my relatives, cousins, aunts, uncles, parents, sisters, anybody's reading this, please know that I love you all. And this has I'm not judging anything, but this is the reality of how it was when I was a kid, okay? Now, all around me, right, every grandparent I had, every aunt and uncle I ever had, every cousin I ever had, every friend I ever had, everyone around me, right? And I don't know if this was a geographical thing about like a New York kind of thing or what, but everyone around me had this certain brand of, let's call it deprecating humor, right? And what I mean by that is that, that there was always this sense of competition. Right. It was like, but even to the point of like when you're trying to have fun and you're trying to make people laugh. Right. The only way I ever was exposed to humor, right? Anybody trying to make somebody laugh around me, including myself, it was always at the expense of someone else. Right? It was always like we made fun of each other, and that's the way we laughed. Now, of course, it was all in good, I'm not saying that everybody's evil around me, right? And that's not the case. Everybody was not evil. Everybody cared about each other, right? But yet the humor and just the expression that we had and just the general ways in which we operated in our lives was always kind of putting each other down. Okay. Now, where that comes from, I can't tell you. Okay. And I don't really care. It doesn't matter. Right. But the fact is that was the way that I grew up. Right. And so there was very little, and it pervaded into all areas of life. Right. And this even like when my father, and again, I know that my father was trying his best, and I know that he meant the most for me, and he wanted nothing but the best for me. Right. And I know that's his motivation. So it's not like this, like judging kind of thing here. Right. It's just explaining it. Right. That's all I'm doing is explaining it. Okay. And that's for everyone, not just for my family to hear that. Right. Like you need to understand that this is not me saying that it's evil to make fun of each other. Look, it's not nice to make fun of each other. It doesn't feel good to anybody else to make fun of people. Right. But it doesn't mean that you don't care either. Right. I think mostly the sort of the vibe and the philosophy behind it was somewhere along the lines of, well, if we can't laugh at ourselves, what do we have kind of thing. And there's some logic to that. I'm not going to discount that too much, right? But the thing is, as I say, it pervades into everything, right? So when, when it came time to, to think about like what I was going to do for the rest of my life in terms of a career, when I grow up and stuff like that, as a teenager, I'm talking, there was very much a competitive aspect to that. Right. There was a competitive aspect that that if you, in order for you to do well, somebody else has to lose. Right. In order for you to win, somebody has to lose. Right. That was the concept that we had. Right. And again, it was, comes from that same place. Right. And the same thing comes from, sort of minor levels of bigotry that I was exposed to. Right. That those people are not our kind of people. Right. And that's a very tribal thing. And that's nothing like that's not unique to my family. That's not unique to anybody's family. Right. Tribalism has been in human race for, literally hundreds of thousands of years. And so there's no, there's no shame in that. Right. And there's no kind of, it's okay, right? Like that's what we do as human beings, right? But here's how this really translates, okay? And this touches upon something that I talk about here a lot on this podcast, right? Is that the concept of practice. Right. So when a person grows up like me, grows up in this environment where every shred of humor is all about, deprecating someone else through it or yourself, and that was certainly true. Right. That we'd be self-deprecating, too. So like, oh, I'm not good enough for that. That's not me. I can't do that kind of stuff. That's other people do that kind of stuff, not me. Right. And so that all kind of comes from the same place. Right. And again, the idea of, constantly putting each other down and constantly, pointing out each other's flaws and constantly, feeling in competition with one another, right? Like that was the general theme with which I grew up, right? And it was real. And it mattered, right? And the reason it mattered is because that is not my ness. That is not what I was put on this earth to be. And I know that now. Right. I know that I feel good and I perform well and people respond to me in the ways that I hope that they will respond to me when I am compassionate. Right. When I lift others up, when I lift myself up along with them. Right? There's no deprecation at all. There's no putting each other down. There's no insult. There's no competition. Right? Like when I help other people, right? Even, and I mean, my father would freak out if he heard about how I help other coaches, right? And even coaches who do what I do, right? So technically my competition, I just don't believe in that anymore. Right? Because honestly, if I'm helping someone who, I mean, there's no other Art Burns, right? So if I'm helping someone who is a female yoga instructor turned mindfulness coach, well, then, if you dig me, you're probably not going to dig working with that person, right? And if you dig working with that person, then you're probably not going to be comfortable working with me anyway. So for you, it makes more sense for me to lift up this person because maybe that's who you need to work with, right? And again, my ness is all about helping, is all about, being that person who is going to, inject goodness into this life, into this world. That's what I'm here to do. And I've realized that through a very specific process that I'm going to talk to you about in just a second. Okay. But the idea is, though, that for all of those years, right, for all of those years, I was, and again, I talk a lot about the programming, right, that we all go through. And we do, right? Like every single one of us, we're born into a certain family. We're born into a certain culture, a certain religion, a certain nationality, a certain, food taste. And, we're all born into a certain world that is determined by those around us. Right. And those people who are around us, they're the ones who and it starts with our mother and father. Right. Or whatever that caregiver is. People grow up without moms and dads all the time. So then it would be whoever that caregiver was, whether it's a grandparent or an aunt or a godmother or whatever it is. Right. That person who you see as your primary caregiver when you were very, very young. Right. that's the person, and all the people that that person is connected with, those are the people who you learned how to live through. Right. And so when, again, when all of the aunts and uncles and my parents and everything, when all they're doing is, putting each other down and making fun, and again, in loving ways. And I don't want you to think that I grew up in this like horrible, violent place. I didn't. I grew up in a very loving, a loving, household of loving family, but it was expressed through this way. Right. Which, I mean, I look back on it now and I say, no, you're all wrong. Like, this is not the way we should do it. And that's fine. Right. It's okay for us to evolve as a tribe too. And if they want to come with me, then that's great. But if not, maybe I'm starting a new tribe with my family. Right. And that's okay too. Right? There's nothing wrong with any of this, right? But the point that I'm trying to make is that when we grow up, and again, it doesn't have to be just, deprecating humor. It can be anything, right? Like maybe, if you grew up in a house where everyone sings a lot, right? Or if somebody else grows up in a house that is, incredible soccer fans, like from the earliest memory they have, they were watching soccer, playing soccer, talking about soccer, right? Or, or a florist, maybe you grew up in a house that was, where your father owned a flower shop, right? And you were always exposed to flowers, right? What happens is that thing that we're exposed to, right? That sort of predominant, tendencies and sort of attitudes and methodologies of life. That's what you're going to adopt, right? And so even though I always felt weird about it, right? I always felt that it wasn't my place to be making fun of each other. Actually, I wrote quite a few notes on this, by the way. You can see it's pages and pages like this. And I had real deep brainstorm the other day about this on Saturday. But and one of the things I wrote down here is that, part of this upbringing, was standing up for yourself. And being strong and not letting people push you around. And if push comes to shove, you shove harder, right? That's how I grew up, right? Well, and I mean, and I'll tell you, I mean, I don't think my parents really watch these videos or anything. I mean, they might read the emails, but I don't think they watch this. And if you do, I love you and I apologize for sharing this. But, my parents were also very physically, in terms of discipline and stuff like that. My mother specifically, she was very, very physically, dominant in that way. Right. But again, that's how she was conditioned. Right. That's not her ness either. Right. But it wasn't my nest, but it was this thing that I got, conditioned to do. And one of the things that I wrote down in my notebook here is that throughout all of my young, and I was a kid, I was a boy in New York City in the late 70s, right? As I was, I was born in 69. So by 79, I was 10 years old, right? And so when I get into schoolyard scraps and be part of that, I'm part of the group that's bullying somebody now today, and tomorrow I'm the one that's being bullied and all that stuff, that all existed for me, right? But I distinctly remember, and this is right up to even when I was playing hockey, right? Like I couldn't hit somebody as hard as I was supposed to, right? Playing hockey. Like I would always pull up because I just felt this heartfelt regret for hurting someone. And I can remember in the handful of times, 2 or 3 times that I was actually in a physical fight, because I wouldn't be that guy, but the few times that I remember feeling like the first time I punched somebody in the face, which was terrible. I hate to even talk about this. We were, 8 years old or something like that, and I just felt the feeling that I had in my hand for days after that. I was crying to myself at night. How could I do that to my friend Steven Grossman? If you're out there, Steven Grossman, I haven't seen you in 45 years, but man, I love you and I'm sorry about that. I hope that you're all right. I'm sure the little 15-minute altercation we had, I'm sure it doesn't impact you the same way it impacted me, but I'm really sorry that happened. Right. And so what I'm saying here is that, as I grew up in this world, right, and surrounded by all the people that I trust, all the people I admire, all the people who are responsible for my well-being, right? And they're all doing the same thing. They're being mean to each other, and, even in this kind way, just, kind of being hurtful towards each other, right? I never felt right. But the thing is, when you're a kid, you can't discern that. You can't say, oh no, this doesn't feel right to me, so I'm going to evolve out of this and I'm going to become somebody else. It doesn't work that way, right? Instead, what happens is you adopt what you're exposed to. And this comes down to the concept of practicing, right? Even though this was not something in my core, it's something that I practiced over and over and over and over. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, I was practicing being this person who was mean and again, I use the word deprecating. I don't even know if that's the right word in this situation, but putting people down, right? Like I became so accustomed to it that's who I thought I was, right? That's what I thought was my ness, but it never was, right? And so as we cultivate, then this is the how part of it, right? That as we cultivate a deep awareness of ourselves, right? And when I say a deep awareness of ourselves, I don't mean what's happening here, right? I mean what's happening here in our heart and here in our gut, right? When we can deepen our awareness and find that part of us, right? That deep, instinctive, real thing, the real part of us, right? Who we really are. You might call it your authentic self. You might call it your true self. You might call it your ness, like I like to call it, right? But my Art-Ness had nothing to do with punching people. It had nothing to do with insulting people. It had nothing, and I know that now because I've developed this awareness to know that when I feel the best, when I feel motivated, when I feel in the flow, it's when I'm being kind to people. It's when I'm being the goofy, and this also applies now. This is another funny part of this is that, when I first started becoming a mindfulness coach, I tell this story all the time that when I first went to a meditation center, I couldn't even walk in, right? Because I was like, I don't belong in this place. I belong at the football stadium down the road with a beer in my hand, screaming at the top of my lungs, getting into fist fights. Like, that's where I belong. Right? But it was never where I really belonged, but that's what I thought I was. And that's who I thought I was. And so it was only when I deepened the awareness and I realized that no, when I am at my best, right? Oh, anyway, I'm sorry. I was telling this story about me becoming a mindfulness coach, right? So when I became a mindfulness coach, I was like, you can even listen. I laugh at some of the old recordings that I have of some meditations from like 3-4 years ago. I sound like this. I'm trying to be the person who you expect me to be as a mindfulness coach. I have to be mellow. I have to be quiet. I have to represent the mindfulness that you expect. Once I got rid of that, that's when I started doing the work. Once I realized that, no, I can be excited. I can be my happy, jittery, just explosive energy self. And I can still teach people mindfulness. I can still practice mindfulness this way. In fact, it's best to do it this way for me because this is who I am. If I try to be this and I go out and I get a bunch of flowy clothes and some beads to wear and some rings and bells, and then I'm just putting on a different costume. I'm just becoming somebody else that's one step removed from who I really am. And it took my work in these practices that I talked to you about. It took this work to get to understand that. And it's the only way. I shouldn't say that. Hold on a second. I should stop because I think there's methods of therapy and psychoanalysis. And actually tomorrow we're going to talk, it was going to be today, but I flip-flopped them just because I was so inspired by today. But tomorrow we're going to talk about what is meant when we say the shadow, right? Which is a Carl Jung concept, right, of the shadow, which is all this kind of stuff that we're talking about, right? Like I thought like being kind was part of my shadow, right? Because it was something that was not accepted by those around me, right? And so I buried it and I hid it and I cast it into this shadow, right? And I'm going to share the quote with you tomorrow from Carl Jung, but basically he says that if the shadow doesn't become integrated, it rules our life and we call it fate, right? And we call it just that's the way life is, right? And so that is very, and I'm going to tell you that story tomorrow. There's plenty I have to say about that. And I can't wait to share that with you tomorrow. But again, it's the awareness that we cultivate through this, but it's got to be a non-judging awareness. Right? If we're just looking in ourselves and just finding what it is, we're still going to judge those things as negative, right? We're still going to keep them in our shadows, right? Because we're embarrassed by them, right? Like again, hypothetically, like my dad didn't want me to do this, so I feel really uncomfortable doing this, right? Which could be something like being kind, right? And so again, the idea then is the practice of developing a non-judging, accepting awareness, a compassionate awareness, a curious awareness of what's happening inside of us, and a present awareness, right? These are the concepts, and these are the words I talk about all the time, right? Presence, acceptance, compassion, curiosity. Right? That when we can be present with ourselves and see it as it's happening, because that's the only way to know, right? We can't like look back on, oh, how was I feeling yesterday? Because everything you're thinking about what was happening yesterday is being influenced by how you feel in the present moment. So you're not going to get memory doesn't work that way. Memory is influenced, memory of the past is influenced by our present circumstances and our present condition. Right. So it does no good to sit and at the end of the day, just kind of think about, okay, well, how did I feel earlier and what it's not accurate. It has to be in the present moment, right? It has to be mindfully present. That's how it works. That's how we can see into who we really are and what is really happening. Because I put the cart before the horse there for a second. We see what's happening. Right? We see our emotions, we see the physical sensations of our body, we understand our thoughts, and we understand how all of this stuff pulls us away from who we really are here in our heart and in our gut and in our nervous system, which is the essential thing that we are, right? And there's an innate intelligence in there, right? That is an intelligence that can't be fooled by the thoughts. It can't be fooled by other people's opinions. It can't be swayed by that. That instinct, that innate knowledge, that is your ness. And the more you can practice, cultivating a present acceptance, a compassionate, understanding and awareness. I'm sorry. Let me just say that over. I was trying to do something there, but the more we can cultivate through practice, through daily practice, we can cultivate an awareness that is present, accepting, compassionate, and curious. That is how you can find your ness. That thing that makes you special, that thing that is your own. There's nobody else alive who has the exact combination of traits that you have. And so you are so special. You are, and I am too. And everyone out there who's watching this and listening to this, and even those who aren't, okay? Every one of us is so special. But what we do is we bury that specialness. We bury it. We bury it under what we believe the world wants from us. And so we give the world what we think it wants from us, all the while depriving the world of our true gifts and our true capabilities and our true essence. And again, I'm telling you, you'll never feel the power that you will feel when you operate from your authentic self. All right? So listen, I know this was a big one today, and I know we don't usually get so philosophical about things here, but it's everything. I would love to talk more about this, okay? So if you have any questions or you would like to share something about what you feel about what I was just talking about, or you want to just just chat. Maybe you're like, dude, I need to talk to this guy. I need to just see what he says about me. Well, all of these things are possible. And I'm going to put a link in the description that you can click to schedule a call with me. Okay. It's a free, no cost call. Okay. It doesn't cost you anything except just your time and your attention. All right. And with that attention and with that time and with the intention to understand, I can help you. I really, really can. I've helped lots and lots of people before you, and I can help you starting now. Really, as soon as you're seeing this, book the call. And the minute you book that call, that is your intention, right? You're setting an intention to change something about, and to get to your ness. And that is the first step. Seriously, just clicking that link is the first step. That's really all you have to do to get this process started. I hope you do. All right. Tomorrow we'll be back and talk about some Jungian psychology and especially the shadow self. And I'm really looking forward to this because this really ties into everything we're talking about today because the shadow is part of your ness. And if you're keeping it unintegrated, then it's really not possible for you ever to cultivate this essence, this core essence and authentic self that I'm talking about. But we'll talk about that tomorrow. Okay. It's very easy. There's nothing special you have to do. And we all have a shadow. All of us. All right. And it doesn't mean it's negative either, by the way. It doesn't mean it's something bad or something to be ashamed of. It's just something to be integrated. And we can only integrate it through, you want to guess? Through an awareness that is present, accepting, compassionate, and curious. All right, everybody. I'll be back tomorrow. I hope you have a great day, and I'll talk to you then. Bye-bye.